It knows how to create life. So when the spiritual principle learns how to create life, or how to infuse life into matter, then it becomes the intelligent principle, which again, it will come here all the time to manipulate the material principle to create more things. Of course, the things that you create at this level are much more advanced than the things you create at that level, but that's how it goes. So the intelligent principle starts its evolution, its development, by doing more and more and more each time with the interaction between these two guys, to a point where the intelligent principle is then so intelligent that it can create a spirit. It becomes a spirit. It individualizes out of the intelligent principle, it becomes a spirit. And the same thing, the spirit will come here to the material principle to do a lot of things, to create more and more and more. And again, what at this level, things are much more advanced than this level, which are much more advanced than that level. That's how it all works. It's a very simplistic way of seeing it. This is a deep study. We can be here for 3 hours just talking about this one slide. That's what we do on Thursday's classes. But for what we need today, that's enough to put us into a context. Okay, within this thing, where is the vital principle? The vital principle is here. It's when the spiritual principle gets the ability to infuse life into matter. Matter by then is the mineral kingdom. So atoms, molecules, and everything else. Okay? So the vital principle fits in right there. Okay, so if you get to the Spirit's book, okay, the Spirit's book is divided in 4 parts, or 4 books, as some people say. The first one is called the First Causes, and that first part has 4 chapters. These are the 4 chapters. The 4th chapter of the first part, the entire chapter, is about this, the vital principle. Okay, so the vital principle has to do with ability to infuse life into matter and make matter be a living thing. That's a very overview concept of what the vital principle is. So in the mineral kingdom, meaning before life, right? Before life, there's no vital principle as of yet. We have the atoms that combines will generate molecules, that combine will generate minerals. The next kingdom, the vegetables, the plants, they already have life here. That's life. There's life here. So you go from the very simple, basic types of all through the entire kingdom to the most advanced ones. Then we get the animals, same thing. It's got a lot of our friends here, right? From all different levels, from the simplest one to the most complex ones, and then us. But what we are concerned about today is that jump over there. We need to investigate that jump over there. How do I go from the material kingdom to the plants? How life starts? How do we infuse life into matter? That would require us to study 2 things, matter and the beginning of life. That's how we would be able to get to some conclusion. That's what we're going to do then. So let's study matter a little bit. We know that inorganic bodies are composed of atoms in combination and molecules and all of that. Now, one interesting thing, this is a molecule, a water molecule. Now, one interesting thing is, for example, if you take carbon, just one element, no combination. Water is a combination of 2 elements. Okay, we're not combining 2. So let's think about just carbon. Carbon has several forms, several variations. When you look, for example, at graphite on a pencil, that's dark, very dark, and soft, very soft. Okay. When you look at a diamond, it's pure carbon, but it's very hard and transparent. But it's the exactly same one only element. So there's something in one type that is different from the other type. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 2 different things. The difference is in how these atoms and molecules connect themselves. It's called molecular structure. Okay. For example, if you look at one of the brilliant inventions of our times, is too old now, but it was the LCD displays. Remember the LCD displays? That little gray background, and the numbers or letters would be black for example, clocks, right? Clocks. So you would change from number 1 to number 2, okay, and then number 3. That is done by changing the molecular structure on that line that's going to compose a number 1, or on those 4 lines that's going to compose a number 2, and so and so. So when you change the molecular structure, you have visually you have the impression that's something else. But you see, it didn't change the chemistry in there. It's still the same display with the same elements. It's just a way of making it happen. It's the same thing here. So the molecular structure can change. So that's interesting because you will be able to infuse life in certain types, but not other types, depending on the molecular structure. Okay. If we look at, for example, the 4 basic elements of nature, the 4 most important, they are all those things that we see formed out of these 4 elements. They use the same 4 elements. What changes here is the molecular combination, depending on how these 4 guys here combine themselves. We're going to have one of those things, but it's the same 4 elements. You see the say oxygen that goes in here is the same oxygen that goes in here. It's not a different one. It's not a specialized type. No, the combination is what produces a different result. And this is inorganic matter. There's no life here. This is simply just regular matter, inert matter as we call it. Now, for these atoms and molecules to be formed and to combine, they follow a basic law. It's called law of affinity. In chemistry, we call electronegativity. Not all atoms combine with all atoms. It's not mix and match. There are some rules for that. It's not lotto. Let's get this atom and that one. Yeah, no, it's not like that. It depends on certain things. It depends on a set of rules. The set of rules is called electronegativity. So not all the atoms are going to combine as we want. Okay? And also, there's something called the law of definite composition, in which you cannot have partial atoms combining. For example, water, as we saw, it's 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogens. You can't do a combination of 1 oxygen and 1.5 hydrogens. You can't break the atom in 2 to make a combination. The numbers have to be integers. Okay? So these are laws that in physics and chemistry we study and we know, we understand the process. But still, how do I infuse life into this thing? We know there are variations. Especially this one show us that there are variations, but we still haven't been able to figure out how life gets infused. In the book of Genesis here, Allan Kardec tells us an interesting thing, which is this. The combination of 2 bodies to form a third requires a particular concourse of circumstances, which are these laws here. It has to follow these laws. Okay? Whether it could be a particular degree of heat to make the combination happen, dryness or humidity. So in certain combinations, you have to be on a dry environment. If you are in a wet environment or humid environment, that same combination doesn't happen. Same with heat, and so same with the movement, rest, electrical current. So there are external factors that will trigger the combination, let it happen or not. So it's not just the 2 atoms or the 3 atoms here and the 3 atoms here. No, there's more. Okay? So there are external elements. Matter by itself does not combine alone. So when we go back, all the way back to the formation of the earth, and we try to understand how matter got along, there's a well-established concourse of things or a sequence of things that happen for that. So the first is what we call the forming principles of the earth, but they are subject to volatilization because the earth is still not ready, still not this ball as we see. It's still forming, so there's still a lot of explosions, so things are still flying. Okay, it's not a stable crust yet. The stable crust becomes later. So now matter is being deposited on the earth's surface. Then the crust is going to cool. There's no life here. We're still in the very beginning. Life is going to cool. Crust is going to cool. Then, depending on the environmental circumstances, there will be molecular affinity. And then these atoms and molecules will start to bond together to form different things, minerals and whatever else, combinations of molecules. So all of that had to happen in that order until we get the very first combination of molecules. That's a long time, but there's no life. This is still inert matter. Now, from here, now I have the minerals. I'm at the the mineral kingdom. How do I get into life? There are theories, okay? There are several theories. The most generally accepted theory is this one, the Oparin-Haldane theory. Oparin was a Russian scientist, and what he said is the reason why we were able to infuse life, or not infuse, how life started is there was all these atoms and molecules and so, and the atmospherical and conditions, the environmental conditions with the sun, the light from the sun and some electricity floating in the air with these explosions, you know, like thunderstorms, it would be, those, they generated life. That's his theory. We can't prove it, of course, but he was able to, that's why his name appears in all these things. He was able to go back in time, if you will, and put a sketch, a script of every single thing that had to happen for those conditions to be ready. And then he said, if we can reproduce this in a laboratory, that would be ideal. Okay? So, in the 50s, 1950s, another scientist, an American scientist called Stanley, he was able to do exactly that. He bought a building, put a lab together to reproduce the initial conditions of the Earth, to see if they were able to generate molecules or living cells or living proteins. You would be living proteins, the first ones. And he was able to. So they were able to reproduce it. So they said, well, that's kind of, you know, general acceptance right there. That is why the Oparin theory is the most accepted one. It does still not explain how life got infused, but at least it tells us what the conditions were for the beginning of life on the planet. If you read about Oparin, it's a very nice study. He went deep into this thing. Okay, so our question is, how that starts? How does a cell start? How does life start? So we already saw that there's cooling of the crust. Okay, we're gonna see this is still material. Let's see in a different way. Okay, so the forces, the cooling of the crust generates viscous elements. So now you have like a mass of things because of the cooling of the crust. So on the crust, what you have now is viscous elements, which become with time like a gelatin, the gelatinous mass that's on the crust. Okay, this mass condensates because of the environmental conditions, according to Oparin. Okay, condensates, and it will generate this condensation generates the first protoplasms, first elements of proteins and everything else. From here, you go into the first cell, unicellular beings. These are under the water, and under the water you have oxygen until, depending on the environmental conditions, oxygen gets out of the water, and then life can go out of the sea to the plant, to the land. That's a general theory. Now, the thing is still, how do I go from here to here? Because this is still pure inert matter. This is life. How do I go from here to here? This is the key point. Okay? All right, so everything that we saw so far is on the matter side. Now we're going to have to dig into life a little bit to see what the connection, how it happens. If you look at the elements that we know, we don't know all of them to begin with, because there's more elements that we haven't been able to figure out yet, but we know a lot. If you look at the elements, the plants, for example, this is life already. The plants are formed from elements that are here. There's not a single element on, for example, all the plants that's not here. They are only here. Same on the next kingdom, the animals. Everything is from this. Everything raises from a combination, a certain combination of these elements. Same for us. So everything comes from a combination of all these elements. And how does it go from that to this? How do we go from inert matter to a living cell, living protein, whatever? There is, then we go back to the first slide, there is one dealing with matter all the time. It goes into the pot where the material principle is, picks up and does something, then it goes back and picks up and does something. That's what's going to happen. The spiritual principle is going to be able to transform that into this through what we call the vital principle. Transforming inorganic matter in organic matter. So the vital principle is, remember, when we saw the first slide, the spiritual principle becomes intelligent principle when it knows how to manipulate this. So this is what's going to allow inorganic matter to become organic matter. It's something that has to be manipulated. The vital principle will allow us to change the structure, the molecular structure of the elements, so we can infuse life in them. Just like graphite and diamond, except that those don't have life in it, but it's the same one only element in a different molecular structure. So the vital principle is what allows us to do this. Okay? And one important thing is this: the first beings, when they were formed, the conditions of their environment were there, but they're not here today. They're gone. That's it. That's billions of years ago. Billions of years. They no longer exist. Those conditions do no longer exist for the first beings on Earth. So we were looking at what forms the body. We saw its elements that are in the periodic table of elements. And us, we are formed of all these elements here. Everything like this. If we take all these elements in this proportion, put on a blender and blend it, we're not going to have a person. Because there is something outside the matter that needs to be in place for the process to happen. The same with the original theories of pairing and everything else. You have all the molecules, but the environmental conditions have to be in place for this to happen. And we are just like most of the planets. The four basic elements that form mostly everything will form 96.2% of our bodies. The same four elements that we see all the time. And these same four elements, remember the other table, it formed sugar cane and walnut oil and olive oil and different things, the same elements. So there's something in here that's not on just the matter itself. So Allan Kardec is going to study that. So he's going to ask questions. He prepares himself to ask questions to the spirits about matter itself. So here's one of them. Is the same matter capable of undergoing all possible modifications and acquiring all possible properties? So you see, his question is, can matter be operated in any way possible that we can? And the answer is yes, yes. And this is what you should understand when we say that everything is in everything. So what he's saying here is, it is possible to apply modifications to matter to create everything. And we can see that because, remember the first slide, we have the material principle. From that, you do anything. Anything comes from there. So it's in line with what we know. And then he makes a comment. Okay, this is the answers from the spirits. Then, in regards to the answer, he makes a comment. Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and all the other elements we consider to be simple are only modifications of the one primitive substance. So they are simple for us, but they are already modified from another primitive substance, and that's the universal fluid. They all come from the universal fluid. So you see, that's why we have different outcomes. You can take carbon, you can take the fluid and create carbon in a certain way, or on another way, or on another way. That's why we're going to have graphite and diamond, because it comes from the same source, but they are modified in different ways. I can give you water, okay, and you can say this is water, but you can also tell me that a cube of ice is water. It's in a different form. It came from the same source. It was just modified. Same thing. Alright, then Kardec is going to say, what is he's going to study this. What is the difference in binding atoms and molecules in an organic body and a non-inorganic body? He's going to ask questions about this. So, does one and the same force unite the material elements in both organic and inorganic bodies? Let's understand the question. Forces that unite the material. What's the material? Atoms and molecules, and then they got binded together. The question is, the force that binds these together on a chair is the same force that binds in my body. That's his question. Yes, it's the law of attraction, which is the same for all. So, the difference is not on the force. That's why he asked the question. The difference between what binds the atoms in my body and the chair is not the force that binds them. It's something else. So he's got to go to the next question. Okay, take the force out of the way because that's not where the difference is. Then he asks again, is there a difference between the matter itself? So you see, he eliminated the force. It's not the force. So now he's going to say, well, okay, do you guarantee me that the elements in this body here is the same elements on the chair? That's his question. Answer. It is always the same. But in organic bodies, it is animalized. So that eliminates being the matter. Being the carbon, the hydrogen, the nitrogen, oxygen, calcium. They are the same. So the difference is not on the force that binds them, and it's not on the elements themselves. The difference is here, right? In organic bodies, it is animalized. So we got to study what animalized means. That's kind of a not very good word because it doesn't mean dogs and cats and rats. It's not this. It doesn't come from animal. It comes from anima, which is soul of life, breath of life. Anima, soul. That's what it is. It's not dog and cat. Okay. So it is animalized, means it has infusion of a spirit in there, a soul. There's something that's not physical. It's out of the physical plane in there that is infused into these elements. But the elements themselves, the matter, is the same. So you see, Allan Kardec eliminates first the force that binds. That's not it. How about the matter? It's not it. So it's something else. So let's study that something else. Right? The elements that form us and the chair are exactly the same. And then he's going to say, well, but what makes it happen? What makes this animalization, if you will? And the answer is, it's union with the vital principle. So that is the differentiating element. There is vital principle in here. There's no vital principle on the chair, on the desk, whatever. Okay, so vital principle then, we already saw by then, it's learned experience from the spiritual principle. It takes a long time for a spiritual principle to learn how to operate the vital principle. Okay? And here we'll continue. Question 63. These are all here. Okay? Spirit's book. Does the vital principle reside in a particular agent, or it's merely a property of organized matter? You see how smart he is? He eliminates matter. He eliminates the force. He eliminates matter. What is it? It's a vital principle. Where is the vital principle? Show me. That's his question. Show me. Where is it? Where does it come from? So he's asking, it's something that, it's an agent external to matter, or it's in matter itself? Okay? Let me try to explain this because this gets a little gray sometimes. Think about a color. Say, red. Okay? Is red a property of matter, or it's outside matter? It's a tricky question. Think about this. Let's open a parenthesis here. Is red, is that a property of matter, or it's something outside matter? Red, does it have atoms and molecules and something? No, right? So it's not matter. On the other side, matter, red only applies to matter. You can't meet red outside. You can't meet yellow outside. Hey, yellow, how are you? It doesn't exist. It attaches to matter. Is that okay? Is that clear? It's confusing, right? It's paradoxical. Paradoxic, right? It's paradoxic.
Paradoxical.
Paradoxical. He taught me the other day. It's paradoxical. So the color itself does not exist by itself. You have to have some sort of matter to relate to apply the color to. You can have a yellow chair, a red chair, a yellow desk, a red desk, but you can't have the color by itself if you don't bind it to matter. So it's gray area. It's the same thing here. The same thing here. That's why they answer it's both. So Allan Kardec is asking, is this outside the matter or it's part of matter? And what they're saying is it's both. It's like the color. You have to have both binded together to make sense. Okay? So it's, and then he goes, life is an effect produced by the action of this agent upon matter. However, without matter, the agent is not life. Just as matter cannot be alive without the agent. One depends on the other. For example, the color depends on the object, and the object depends on the color. It's a combination that it binds them together. Same thing here. That's the idea of this answer. It's both. Because when you say it's both, it's a little, how come? How can it be both? It's both in this sense. They live together. They walk in together. They walk together. And then he comes with the last question. So the question here is, show me where this thing is. Then the next one is, does a vital principle reside in any of the bodies that we know of? And the answer is, the source is the universal fluid. It's not in my body, it's not in the chair, it's in the universal fluid. If it's in the universal fluid, remember that there are two things. Spiritual principle, right? Remember that. Spiritual principle and everything else, universal fluid, in which matter is contained. So the vital principle is part of the everything else. It's part of the universal fluid. So it is, in part, matter. It's in matter. You just have to know how to use it. It's a little confusing. This thing is very tricky because it's paradoxical. It changes the way we think. We have to change the way we think. What you take from here is, try to meet yellow out in the streets. You can't. Think about this. It has to have matter so you can relate colors to. You have to have some sort of matter. It could be a ball, it could be a desk, it could be anything. But by itself, the color doesn't make sense. Okay? So it's the same thing here. And then he goes and asks, what happens when we die then? What happens to both of these things, the matter and the vital principle? What happens? And the answer is here. The inert matter decomposes, because now you had a separation. These things kind of separated. So the inert matter, which is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, everything in the periodic table, those will be used to form something else. They're going to be used to form other beings. And the vital principle returns to the mass where it came from, return to its origin. And then things separate. These atoms and molecules are ready to be something else, and this is returned to the origin. So I don't know if you can see the consistency of in the line of questions that Allan Kardec is putting. He's very thoughtful. Okay, show me where this thing is. It's in a matter. No, it's not. It's in a force. No, he starts eliminating. He goes, speaking the spirits to answer him properly until the point where they say, well, here's the answer. So vital principle is in the universal fluid. So when we die, these elements, each one goes to its own thing. The vital principle goes back to its source. So summarizing a little bit, vital principle is the cause of the animalization of matter. Animalization is not dog, is not cat, it's not horse, it's anima. It is a driving force of organic bodies. It's what makes the organic bodies be organic bodies. It sustains them. We're going to see that a little bit later. And then in the book of Genesis, Allan Kardec is going to say this. If oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbon, if these four elements combine, they can be combined anytime. anytime. They create a million things. We saw some of them on the table. But if they are combined without the vital principle, they form only a mineral body. Without the vital principle, no life. Okay? Now I need to call your attention for something. If you have this book at home, in English, not Portuguese, in English, you have this book at home, the Genesis, you're going to find this. That's where the phrase comes from. You're going to find this phrase in this edition. I'm not sure about any other editions on this one. You're going to find this phrase. If oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and carbon combine without the vital fluid, not vital principle. That's what it is in this book. Okay? That's strange because that's not what it's supposed to be. So we go to the original French. We don't have to learn French. We can go side by side. Oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon. So far so good, right? It's pretty much, line by line or word for word. And combining them, word for word. Sans means without, okay? Without the vital principle. Not vital fluid with something completely different.
It needs to be corrected.
So I need to make, you need to make a favor to yourself. If you have this edition, or any other edition, check chapter 10, number 18, and make a correction to your book. It is wrong. Parenthesis, the two of us, because we do a lot of seminars and we prepare a lot of material in different languages, and there are several different translations for different languages. There are several translations in Portuguese, several translations across inconsistencies in different translations. And I thought this phrase was strange. I said, it's not making sense to me because this is supposed to be vital principle. So when you go to the French, it's very clear. So if you have this edition, you have to make a correction. Okay?
What's the difference between fluid and principle? I mean,
Yeah, I'm gonna
you're getting to that.
tap on it. Yeah. So
Alright.
that is to be corrected. Yeah, the purpose today is to do vital principle, not vital fluid. But yeah, in the end, we're gonna do a little bit of the difference. So here's a manual in this book. He's gonna tell us several things about the vital principles. So I'm trying to summarize what it says. It's a long text. It is a force that is inherent in organized bodies. Organized bodies. Inorganic bodies will not have it. Aggregates cells and keeps them together. Okay. You see, when Allan Kardec asks about the force, he's not asking about the force between cells, between elements. Hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, it's different than this. This is already at the life level, okay? So it keeps the binds, aggregates, and keeps them together. It controls cell reproduction. That's done by the vital principle too. Responsible for maintaining organic activity. That's how we get going. Okay? If there's no vital principle, that's it. We can't get going anymore. It is the fundamental essence that regulates the existing of living cells. Okay? The vital principle is it's the agent between the spiritual body and passive matter. It's what makes them talk to each other. Okay? And the spirit adapts the vital principle according to its cosmic forces. For example, in other planets, the vital principle is going to be different. Because, go back to Allan Kardec, where's the source of the vital principle? The universal fluid. Universal for this planet. For Jupiter is another universal cosmic fluid. For Saturn is another one. For the moon is another one. So the vital principle will be different from orb to orb. Alright, so we were looking into that. How do we jump from one to another? That is where the vital principle is. So we can only jump from one kingdom to another when the spiritual principle learns how to infuse and use the vital principle into the matter. So coming from the mineral kingdom to the plants, it requires vital principle. Coming to the first, most simple forms of animals, zoophytes, requires vital principle. Coming to the animals, requires vital principle. Okay, from the most simple ones all the way through the scale to the most advanced ones, everything here has vital principle. And it goes to the next level, the anthropoids, same thing, requires vital principle in us too. So Allan Kardec looks at this. The guy's too smart for me, so bear with me because he's way too smart. He looks at this and says, okay, is the vital principle the same for all? Or it's per family here, per kingdom? So he has that. Is the vital principle the same for all organic beings? Yes, it's the same vital principle because it comes from the same source. But it is modified according to each species. So you see the vital principle that goes here is modified to attend this particular species, which is different than this, than this, than this, than this. Otherwise, we would have all the living beings exactly the same. So what makes different, what he's saying here, that's wide, that's big. What he's saying here is what makes a difference between species is the vital principle, which is modified for each one of them. It is this principle that enables all species to move and act. It also distinguishes them from inert matter, as we saw, because the movement on matter per se is not life. It only happens, matter is moved. Matter doesn't move itself. Matter is moved by something. That something is a vital principle. Is that okay so far? It's complicated, right? Because it's a lot more than, yeah, vital principle provides life. It's a lot more. It's a lot more. Okay? It does, in a way, in simple words, yes, that's what it does. But when you go to study this, so another summary here. It's, the vital principle is responsible for infusing all organs with vital fluid. Vital fluid is what circulates. For example, let me give you by analogy. On that outlet, there's no electricity. There's no electricity right now. Because if you had electricity here, you would be paying more to FPNL per month. You only pay more when you put something in there. If you put a radio in there, now you're draining current. If you unplug the radio, there's potential for energy here, potential for it. There's no electricity. Potentially it's present, but it only really happens, the circulation of current only takes place when I put my radio on it, my lamp, my bulb, whatever. And it's the same thing here. The FPNL is the vital principle. When I plug something in it, that's the vital fluid that is circulating. That's the difference between the two. Vital principle is a principle, it's a potential energy. Vital fluid is that in action. Okay? So, coming back, vital fluid sustains harmonic activity throughout the body. It reestablishes body functions which might have been temporarily disabled or suspended because of lesions and damage to certain organs. Okay, so if it's not compromised. So if it's not fully compromised, yeah, the vital principle will bring you back to life, if you will. Okay? Alright, so how does that happen here, right? The vital principle modifies the molecular composition of the body to give it special properties. Instead of a mineral molecule, one has organic molecule. Vital principle is like the LCD that I showed you, right? That makes the number 1, 2, 3, 4. You modify the properties of certain parts of the display to show numbers and letters and whatever you want to show. Okay? That's the same thing here. That's what the vital principle does. It will modify the molecular composition. And what is modifying molecular composition? Again, graphite and diamond. They are the same element, only one element, in a different molecular composition, molecular structure. Okay. Alright, so the vital fluid is something that it's a separate study, But just to reinforce what I said, the vital principle is potential energy. That's the outlet. The vital fluid is the energy in action. It's when I plug something in, right? It would be like I got a radio here. If the radio is unplugged, there's no, quote, live on the radio. Okay? When I plug the radio, yes, then there's live on the radio. So there's now the principle that was available to me, got in action, and now I have vital fluid. Okay. Vital fluid is a study. It's a long study too. We're going to do that in our classes on Thursdays, starting next week. But yeah, we might bring you here too to do a vital fluid class here or a lecture here, a talk on Sunday. Okay. All right. So with the vital fluid, we're not going to go much into that because that's not the purpose today. But just to wrap up, understanding vital fluid will make us understand transplants, the limitations, and why some are successful, some are not. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to do. There's everything to do with the vital fluid. Cloning. You see, cloning fails, or it failed a lot until very recently, because science does not look into vital fluids. For them, it's just physical elements, physical cells. So you would fail from the science point of view with no explanation whatsoever. But we know for us it's an easy thing to figure out because we got the explanation in all our books. And another thing is medicine. Some of these medicines, some of these remedies, and so some work, some don't. It works for certain people, it doesn't work for other people. The same medicine and two people with the same exact condition. The results, the outcome is not the same at times. Okay. For some people, you have to take some of the medicine and give them like triple the dosage in comparison to somebody else. And apparently, if you look from the physical standpoint only, it wouldn't make any sense because no, but you got this. Your blood test is exactly the same as that guy. So why do I have to give you triple or 4 times the dosage here instead of here? Because there's something else, of course. And so that something else is related to our studies of vital fluids. That's what we wanted to bring today. Vital principle, difference between vital principle and vital fluid. But most of all, it's not something like this. It's a lot to it. It's complicated. And we have a lot of literature here. But one thing is, make the correction to your books, please. Thank you.
Questions?
Questions?
Yeah, no questions.
No, you're going to answer questions. No, it's too difficult.
You were running real quick there.
You said
No,
that,
it's 11.
No, it's okay.
after death, inert matter decomposes. It's used to form other beings, and the vital principle returns to the mass.
To its origin, yeah.
To its origin. That's what I was going to ask.
Allan Kardec uses the word mass in French, okay, meaning this pot, where it came from, in the sense of a pot. As if you, like, put your hand on a pot, pick up something, do something with it, and then put it back on the pot. That's the general sense.
Okay.
In French, he uses the word mass.
Okay.
Okay, it's this pot, which is the principle, the material principle, which is part of the universal fluid.
Okay. Also, at various points, you made me think of alchemy and what's that? The study of the
Amino acids.
You know, alchemy. It seems to me that alchemists use these formulas and they combine different physical
Yes.
elements and think they can create something. But that's the failure of alchemy, is forgetting.
Again,
that there is
it's the
this
same
other-
as cloning. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what this guy, the O'Paring, that guy that went to the lab, actually Stanley bought a building, created the lab to reproduce the original conditions of the earth. Original conditions from our point of view that we think they were. We might be wrong, but they were able to reproduce it by combining elements, but they can't sustain. It generates some sort of protein, but they can't sustain. It dies right there.
So there's nothing to these legends of golems and homunculus and things like that.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean,
Some Jewish rabbi in Eastern Europe was supposed to have successfully created a golem that he could control.
yeah, but you see, it's like cloning, right? Remember the dolly, the sheep? Yeah, we were able to do it, but then she died with like 6 years of life or something. Very fast, very, very fast. She aged at a rate that was unimaginable for the conditions and the experiment and everything else, without any reasonable scientific explanation whatsoever. The explanations it has to do with the vital fluid. Huh?
So this dolly, the sheep, right, where didn't have enough of the vital principle, or it was just a borrowed portion, I guess.
That's one of them, but there's also something else. We're going to touch that briefly, not briefly, in details on the class too. But in the cells, in the cells, we have the mitochondria. It's part of the cells. In the mitochondria, there's an element that is our connection to the spirit world, and that wasn't considered. They don't even know about it, basically. That's why the mitochondria, which is responsible for metabolism, wasn't working right. That's why their metabolism was at a speeding race and they die fast.
Could you differentiate the difference between vital principle and vital fluid? As vital principle is given by God, it's existent in the universe, and that's how kingdoms are created. And vital principle has a lifespan, so it's
Vital fluid has a lifespan.
Is individualized for each particular being. So that's why the sheep didn't live, because there was not a lifetime or amount.
That's what I was saying.
Fluid for that.
Yes.
So we are all born with a certain amount of vital fluid.
Mm-hmm. That's your gas. That's
Right.
your gas.
And that ends when we die.
Right. You can go a certain mileage.
Would you
with
say
it.
that that's, simplistic way?
Simplistic
That's
way,
the
yeah. There's
difference.
several analogies that we can do. For example, a car, right? When the car is in a parking lot, it still has a motor, it still has gas in the tank, it has everything, but it's not started. When you turn the ignition, that's your vital principle. The starter motor is your vital principle. You start. Then from that point on, you are using vital fluid, which is your gas. You can go a certain mileage. The FPNL thing is another example. Anything that gives us the idea of this is a potential, this is available for me to use, and now I'm using it.
It's like kinetic,
That's a general
kinetic
idea.
energy.
Kinetic and potential energy, that's exactly what it is. Vital fluid is kinetic energy. Vital principle is potential energy.
Now, Luiz, I've got a question, it may not make sense, but you were talking about how the vital principle, when it's, when you pass away, it goes, when the elements
That's what the
break
spirits
up,
say, yeah, it returns to the mass.
it returns to the mass. Now, a chair,
Uh-huh.
does that have vital principle in it?
No, but it has spiritual principle.
But it has spiritual principle, that's what because these
If we were able-
don't have life.
But they have a form.
But they have a form.
If we were able, we can't do this, but if we were able to yank the spiritual principle out of this chair, it would disappear because the elements would go back to the universal fluid. All the carbon atoms and all single atom and molecule here would go back to the universal fluid. This thing would disappear.
Right.
Okay, that makes me think of that the example of Socrates and Plato. Plato talked about the idea of the chair existing in the spirit world. Is that related all to what you're talking about?
No, it's not this. No, because we're talking about a physical chair.
Physical.
A physical chair, physical. You touch on it like a desk here. You touch on it,
The
this,
spiritual principle is what creates the chair
and maintains it.
and maintains it. Okay.
If
And
you-
that's what Plato's getting at. A spiritual principle is a spiritual, and he called it a spiritual idea.
But
The
it creates
form
a
of the
physical chair.
existed in the spirit world before the physical.
No. It has. I don't think so. I don't think so because the atoms and everything, they are physical level. They are created. There's a physicality to the chair. What you're saying is it was created as a
Like a design.
But the design is not the thing. Yeah, the idea of creating, yes, comes before creating. But it's not, you create there and you copy and paste. Here, it's not like this. The design, yeah, of course.
Also, I was thinking when you were talking about cloning, that creation by the spiritual principle is, to come up with a crude analogy, is like creating a cake from scratch, whereas cloning is creating a cake from a Betty Crocker.
Right. Some modification of something you already.
That's
Yeah.
good, that's good.
Yeah.
We women get it, right?
Cloning is transformation, right? You
Yeah.
pick up something already in existence and you make changes, modifications, apply different forces, whatever it is.
Do you have any idea why Kardec simply didn't use the word energy as opposed to fluid? Is it because in his time energy
At this
wasn't
time,
defined?
this time.
Yeah, that's my suspicion. But then my question is, we have passed that point because we are far ahead in time as compared with Kardec, and we know what energy is. My question is why is it in the new translations or the new editions of Kardec
They don't use that.
codification, they use energy? They could simply make a note saying, okay, this is the word that Kardec used because in his time the energy concept didn't exist, but what he's referring to as fluid is energy.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It would
Right.
be preferable, but the
Yeah.
thing is, nobody. We have one set of translations from the spiritual, the codification, and the guy who translates on the first couple of pages, he says this: we need to make a more fluent verbiage.
Yeah.
Because it's from 1857, even in Portuguese, it's a
Right.
Portuguese translation. So his space is different, okay, as you read compared to other editions. And a lot of the words he uses on his book are not the original words, but the sense is better because we grasp more out of it. Yeah. There's no prohibition there. It's a matter of
Right,
somebody
right.
just willing to do it.
I think we gotta be, how to say, truthful to what he got from the spirits.
To the idea.
Yeah, to the idea. But that said, if you are cautious enough to bring that to attention to the reader, then afterwards, yes, to me it would avoid a lot of confusion
would.
if you just say energy.
Energy. You wouldn't have to educate the reader.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
You see that translation of the gospel, the black one? If you look at the language and the verbiage, it's different than the others.
Yeah.
Of course, the idea is the same, but
Right.
the flow of the
Yeah,
vocabulary and the words is
I like
different.
the black verbiage.
I do too.
Yeah.
The idea of using energy instead of vital principle and vital fluid, I think to the point you made before about the difference between the vital principle and vital fluid. The vital principle is potential energy and the fluid is energy in action. So you would still need to make that distinction.
Yeah, because it's easier for us in the modern
Energize
days
or
with the
energy.
modern language to go by that,
Right.
like you said.
Yeah.
You see, we teach a seminar, actually the seminar for mediumship that we did here, that 8-hour seminar. We spent 30 minutes talking about fluids and educating for the next 7 hours that fluid is energy. And then I think at least that's my personal thought that they grasp the idea. Grasp the idea. But yeah, I agree 100% with you. Okay?
Any more questions?
Yes.
Okay, we're not going to do passes today. Can I have somebody, what? And I got it. And then, so I need somebody here to do the final prayer. Would volunteer? Isabel, can I have you
Sure,
do it,
I'll volunteer.
please? Thank you.
Elevating our thoughts to God and appreciate everything that was given to us today. May this week be filled with joy and the expectation that we are evolving, that we are creating, and thanking Jesus for being part of our lives. Be thankful for the house of prayer that we have, for our families, our friends, our jobs, and take in everything that we learn every day. and evolve and progress. Let's all enjoy this beautiful, sunny Sunday. And so be it.
So be it. One announcement I'm gonna make is that next Sunday, the center will not be open. So in 2 weeks, we'll be here again, having our Sunday English. And you said you had an announcement?
Oh yeah, we are gonna do a refresher for those who are past givers already, but we're gonna have 3 weeks of class for our meetings and our Thursday English meetings. So it will be 3 hours of theory and 1 hour of practical. So if you guys would like to join us, either to become a past giver, if you are studying Spiritism, or if you just want to come in to do a refresher. Okay?
Will this be done in English?
It will be done in English
Okay.
on Thursday, on 3 Thursdays.
The 3 Thursdays.
3 consecutive, or it depends.
Okay, this one.
It may not be consecutive.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
When is
Okay.
that? Is it starting this week or is it?
Next week, not this week.
Yeah, this
We're
week we
finishing up.
end the current module, which is
Starting next
evolution.
week.
Evolutionary.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you very much. Have a great day, okay? Thank you.
Close.
See you Thursday.
Okay.
Bobby? See you that Thursday then?